All right again. How's everybody out there in the YouTube land? Hope you're doing good. We're going to do a Bible study, and this is about the temple of God. You'll see where I'm going. All right, so in Matthew 27, verse, let's see here, 50, starting in verse 50, and when Jesus had cried out in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. So this is Jesus on the cross. He's just gone through all of the torment leading up to the cross. He's on the cross and he's being crucified. Verse 51, at that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split. Right? You can go on reading there. It's one of my favorite passages in the Bible, but for the sake of brevity, we'll keep it simple. If you know nothing about the temple, totally fine. I didn't know much about this for years, but when they created the temple, at first it was a traveling tabernacle. It was a tent that they set up, and they had an outer area and then an inner area, and then they had the holiest of holies. And I am not an expert on all of that, but the holiest of holies is where only the high priest could go in and do the sacrifices that needed to be handled for the forgiveness of sins for the children of Israel. So that was the one place, and that was where like the Spirit of God resided. Not that he couldn't reside other places, but that's the holiest of holies. That's where they did the sacrifices for the forgiveness of sins. So in this passage, as we look here, it says in 51, at that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. So previously, if you were anybody other than the high priest and you walked into the holiest of holies, drop dead. That's it. You could not go into the holiest of holies. And even the high priest, if they hadn't been forgiven, from what I remember being told, they would tie a rope around their ankle, and it would have bells on it, if I remember right. And if the bells stopped jangling, they knew that the high priest was dead, and they would pull him out by this rope. So this was an area that you could not even go into as a fellow Israelite. You couldn't. So only the high priest could go in there and perform the rituals for the forgiveness of sins. So anyway, this passage right here is the crucifixion of Jesus and the tearing of the temple curtain from top to bottom, which opened and allowed us Christians the ability to come before God through Jesus' blood and his sacrifice for the forgiveness of sins. He is the sacrifice for all sins. So there is no need for a future temple. There is no need for a future sacrifice. So if we as Christians are looking forward to the rebuilding of the third temple, it's not for us. Okay? So let me tell you where the temple of God is. And this is, there was a video and it's like, the temple of God is hiding in plain sight. It is. So let's read where it is. It says here in 1 Corinthians 3:16, don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple, and that God's Spirit lives in you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him. For God's temple is sacred, and you are that temple. We, as Christians, are the temple. His Spirit dwells within us. We don't need a new temple. Matter of fact, that is probably a smack in the face to God, wanting a new temple built. to reestablish something that God sent Jesus to die for, to once and for all set us free from forever. I see a lot of YouTube videos where people are so excited about the red heifers being sacrificed so that the Jews can reestablish the sacrifice, and consecrate a new temple, potentially destroy the Dome of the Rock or wherever, and build a new temple, and to reestablish the sacrifices. But the reason they want the new temple built and to reestablish the sacrifice is because they want the abomination that causes desolation to happen in the new temple, which is most likely not an accurate description of what all is going on. But let me explain that just for 1 second. They believe that if the new temple was built and there are sacrifices reestablished, that this will actually usher in the Antichrist, and the Antichrist will rise to power, and that us Christians will be pulled out of the world before any of this bad stuff happens, and called the rapture. And then once this happens, the Antichrist will come to power, total great I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but great tribulation. The world is supposed to go through a great tribulation because of these events. Why on earth would we want that? Why on earth are we so adamant and so desiring for the temple to be rebuilt, to reestablish the sacrifice, so that the Antichrist can come in and do the desolation, the whatever it is, to desecrate the temple, so that the Antichrist will come in? What sense is that? When the whole time we're the temple. We don't need this third temple. Will it be built? Possibly, but that is not what's going to save you. The building of the temple, the whole red heifers, the Antichrist, all this stuff, that has no bearing on us as Christians. We have the Holy Spirit in us. One of the things that kind of chaps my hide a little bit is people during worship service was, Lord, bring your Spirit into us. Bring your Spirit and bring your Spirit. I'm like, the Spirit is in us. We are the temple. If we are Christians and we believe in God, the Spirit is within us. So if the music ministers wanting more people to come in that have the Spirit, that's great. But we can't usher in more of the Spirit because the Spirit's in us. So anyway, I think one of the key things that people miss out in end time doctrine is that Jesus warns us over and over again about false teachers, wolves in sheep's clothing, and we keep missing the mark. What we need to be aware of is those false teachers who are teaching us things that aren't biblical. They're not godly. And there are some things that are tied to biblical end time scenarios and stuff like that, but we need to focus on what God told us to do. And it's something that I struggle with probably the most, and that is telling people that I know in person about Jesus. And it's a challenge for me. It's easy to do it, through a screen. That's a piece of cake. But doing it real time with coworkers or family members or friends that you've known for years, that could be a little more tricky. But that's what we should be focusing in on. I'm not saying that end time scenario stuff isn't fun to read about, but we shouldn't get wrapped around the axle, and we shouldn't be waiting for the red heifer, for the third temple, for the sacrifices to be reestablished so it'll usher in the Antichrist. What sense is that? I joked around and said all we got to do is kill the red heifers before they get sacrificed, and then we'll stop the Antichrist from coming. Come on, folks. All right, take care. God bless. Bye.